Thank you. Before I start, can I request that if you're not speaking, you're kind enough just to mute. We seem to have a little bit of background noise. My apologies and thank you in advance. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. Please remember, if you have a question for the candidates on education, then you can use the chat facility or raise your hand. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to NAHT Cymru's non-selective hustings event for candidates standing for election in the Senedd within the Vale of Glamorgan constituency. My name is Laura Tams and I'm the organiser here at NAHT Cymru, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this broadcast. I shall run through some brief housekeeping and then pass to our chair for the evening. I am pleased to confirm that this event is being simultaneously translated into Welsh. So if you would like to listen in Welsh, then please click on the Welsh option at the bottom of your screen. We also have a British Sign Language interpreter, Sarah, with us this evening, so please spotlight to access. During the evening hustings, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and as mentioned, if you would like to ask one, then please raise your hand. This function can be found at the bottom of your screen, or please place in the chat function and we can read out on your behalf. We are recording the broadcast, and this will be available on our website within the next day or so. We appreciate you sharing and commenting on our events on social media, and please use the hashtag NAHT Cymru Pledge. However, we would like to request that if posting photos of any of our digital broadcasts, you are mindful not to include comments from others, which appear in the chat function, and we thank you for your understanding. I now have the pleasure of handing over to our chair for this evening, Laura Joel, Director for NAHT Cymru, who will undertake formal introductions. Laura.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you once again for everyone who's registered for this afternoon's event. Can I please remind you that if you're not speaking at the moment, if you could please mute your microphone, that would be great. Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the candidates and the virtual audience who have joined us for this non-selective hustings event in the Vale of Glamorgan. NAHT Cymru is the largest school leaders union in the UK, and we pride ourselves on representing the views of our members in all our campaign and organising activity. Never before have we seen such a crucial time for education in Wales, with curriculum reform, new legislation on ALN, and of course, COVID recovery. We need the new government to engage with the profession, to work with school leaders, listen to them, and together we can build an education system that will allow our learners to flourish. To set out a little bit more about what NAHT wants to see from the next government, I'm very pleased to hand over to our President, Karina Hansen, who will say a few words before I introduce candidates and we begin opening statements. Over to you, please, Karina.
Been unmuted. There we go. Sorry, keeps muting me. Thank you, and thank you for joining us and coming this evening to listen to us and our questions. I hope you've had time to read our manifesto. We've drawn up priorities that we're hoping that you will support us with and promote over the coming year. I'm just going to highlight a few of those key priorities from our manifesto. The first one, first and foremost, is well-being for our pupils, our staff and school leaders. We're asking you to put well-being at the heart of all policy making moving forward over the next year and several years. We want you to consider the impact of well-being and policy before it's put in place. We've had an incredibly difficult year in schools and our communities. We're committed to supporting recovery, of course, but we want an acknowledgement that it's not just down to schools to lead that recovery for our children and young people in Wales, but we need the wider system to help us ensure that our pupils and their families are supported in that recovery over the next few years. And then finally, we've got the well-being of staff and our leaders that we believe must be prioritised. We can't support recovery of pupils and young people if the well-being of staff isn't right. And in addition to this, we see a recruitment and retention crisis coming forward if leaders are not put at the heart of well-being and recovery as well. Our second key area is funding. A lot of these issues that we're highlighting with you are interconnected, but funding is key. One of the many things that we are talking about is that we believe that education needs to be prioritised at this time. It's a pivotal time. We've got a new curriculum, we've got the ALN bill, and without adequate funding and fair funding, we're never going to get a good world-leading education system in place that the children of Wales and the people of Wales deserve. We're calling on you to ensure a fair funding system is in place rather than the postcode lottery we see at the moment in Wales. Our third area is accountability. We're calling on you to support a review of the middle tier, a priority again that links to funding. We want a review of the middle tier, its value for money, and the impact of the consortia model. And we see some regions benefiting from the consortia model, but it's certainly not the picture across Wales. We're also calling on you to support a break from ESN inspections. Schools were to have a break over this last year to prepare and develop their new curriculum, but it didn't happen. We dealt with crisis of COVID instead. So we want Welsh Government to ensure that schools have the time they need to develop their curriculum. We want Welsh Government to ensure we've got that time without accountability measures in place, because even if the aim there is to support us, we ultimately see them driving the way that the curriculum will be developed. We feel very strongly that schools and school staff must be given time to recover. It links back to well-being, and we're not back to normal business even now. We're still dealing with the impact of an ongoing pandemic. We're not in normal places yet. The fourth area for us is Curriculum 2022. I've mentioned it a little moment ago. We haven't had the time we needed over the last year to make that development. COVID has had a huge impact on us to be able to develop that curriculum. It won't be the same picture in all schools, of course. There will be schools ready to go, but there are going to be lots and lots of schools that aren't ready, and we need all schools to be ready, and they all need that time to get themselves there. Recovery is not a quick fix intervention. It needs long-term planning, and it needs to be based on evidence-based strategies that support curriculum reform at the same time. So we're calling on you to support our call for a delay in implementing curriculum reform to allow schools the time they need to prepare for change, and to engage with the pupils as well and the school communities in that journey, and ensure that the way forward is the right one for children and young people. And then our final area, again, it's another issue of not having yet had the time, because COVID has hindered our ability to prepare, is ALN reform. We want Welsh Government to recognise the substantial investment that is now needed in training and support for schools to enable us to make this reform in ALN. And alongside this, we want to raise the profile of the Elenco. It's a significant one. It hasn't been considered in terms of teachers' pay and conditions. It's a vital role, we believe, that must be recognised and funded appropriately for the responsibilities of the new bill. So that's what we're asking for. We're hoping you're going to support us. We hope you'll sign up to our pledge. We hope that you will help us along the way in the next year. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Karina, and thank you for setting out for the candidates so clearly the NAHT Cymru manifesto. So this evening's event will take this form. I will shortly hand over to each of you and allow you just a few short minutes just to give us a little opening statement around who you are and your vision for education. Then we have some questions that have been sent in by NAHT Cymru members. So I'll seek to put the questions to you individually. You'll each have an opportunity to give a response to each of the questions. Can I please ask that if anybody on the line would like to ask a question of the candidates, please feel free to either raise your hand or put the question in the chat function. Just in response to Carl James's question, yes, 3 minutes is kind of what we're looking at as an opening statement, if that's okay. That would be great. I'm going to introduce candidates as I see them on the screen, so they're completely at random. And to start us off, I'd like to ask Richard Gregg, please, Richard of Plaid Cymru, to give us your opening statement, please. Oh, Richard, sorry, you're on mute.
There we go, sorry. Diolch yn fawr am y cynnig I cymryd rhan yn y hustings yma heno. Thanks very much for the opportunity to take part in these hustings. I have a big interest in education, mainly because I've got 3 children in education, 2 of them in Ysgol Bro Morgannwg and 1 in Cardiff and Vale College. I really appreciate the work that the heads and teachers have put in through this pandemic. I know firsthand how good the provision the children, at least my children, had during that time. I've previously been chair of governors for 8 years for Ysgol Pen y Garth. I went through 2 inspections at that time. I know the strain this put on the head and the staff. You could see how much work they had to put in and the strain they were under. You mentioned the pledge. It was easy for me to sign that because I believe in every word that's in it. A Plaid Cymru government would boost the workforce, reduce class sizes and aid education recovery. As part of our goal to deliver the best start in life for every child, a Plaid Cymru government would extend free school meals to every child in primary school by the end of the first term. We would want to employ 4,500 extra teachers and specialist support staff in schools across Wales, also by the end of the first term. By increasing staff numbers, we can reduce class sizes and ensure the workforce is in place to aid the educational recovery aims and elevate our educational landscape here in Wales. We would employ additional learning needs coordinators and increase professional learning opportunities. Sian Gwenllian, who was a Senedd member until its dissolution recently, she's our spokesperson for education. She commissioned a report on teachers' pay and conditions in 2020, where the following conclusions were made. We believe that the Welsh Government must make full use of devolved powers over teachers' working conditions to ensure that teachers can devote their time to teaching and inspiring their pupils, placing the needs of the child or young person at the centre of everything they do. We believe the Welsh Government must make the profession attractive to potential teachers, raising the status of teaching in a society that will lead to the recruitment of more excellent teachers to meet demand and help retain staff. We consider alternative entry routes into the profession, including initiatives such as support staff development. We believe the Welsh Government must remove all unnecessary interventions that disrupt the essential child-teacher relationship, focusing on meaningful support, monitoring and accountability where necessary, following a full review of the existing practices that are in place. And finally, we must have a renewed focus on mental health and well-being of school leaders and teachers. Currently, as I'm sure you're aware, 1 in 3 teachers is quitting the classroom within their first 5 years. We will address this by valuing the profession, creating better working conditions and opportunities. I'm happy to answer any questions later on when the other candidates have had their chance to speak.
That's great. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for starting us off this evening. If I could turn to the next candidate that I can see on my screen, so that in no particular order I can assure you, is Carl James Langford of Gwlad.
Yeah, I'm just going to make sure I put my stopwatch on so I don't overspeak. So there you go. Right. So thanks for this opportunity to take place in this hustings meeting. Yeah, my name is Carl James Langford. I hold a master's degree and I'm a teacher. I'm an archaeologist, an actor, an author, and certainly I'm not a politician. But I represent Gwlad, the Welsh Independence Party, on its regional list, and for the Vale of Glamorgan constituency. And my role, if elected, is to focus on people and not this political rubbish that seems to preempt the Welsh Assembly. One of NAHT Cymru's key aims is curriculum reform. Heritage and education is the heart of my message. The history of Cymru, Wales, is not truly taught in schools. Plaid Cymru have had 90 years to set the history of Cymru onto the syllabus, and like all other parties, they have failed to do so. Our identity is in the hands of educators. Sir Anthony Hopkins, Oscar winner, an actor, Welsh actor, was hardly mentioned for his triumph. We put so much on education and drama at schools, but little is made of our great Welsh actors. I very much feel that we've done so much online in the last year. I've spent the whole year teaching 9 to 10 classes online, and I feel we should maintain more online education. As a teacher at extramural level, we do not see the same respect given to us as given to mainstream teachers. That has to change. Funding seems to be lacking for some supposed non-key subjects, such as music, crafts, agriculture, etc. Those are the building stones of our future and identity. The level of exams I see is senseless, endless, progress reports and assessments. Let our children learn at their pace. Well-being of our teachers and students and respect for the profession is needed above all, offering accountability. And one thing with Gwlad is that we see that we need a modern educational system that we actually see in many other localities of the world. And we need to focus on STEM subjects also. We obviously got the bilingual focus, which is undoubtedly something that needs to continue. Humanities need to be overhauled, our universities need to be re-looked at, and the approach changed. A new regulatory body. We also need to replace UCAS. And also, one thing that we may not mention today is the need for extracurriculum sport, science and volunteer activities. And this needs to be taken away from teachers. We need to bring outside bodies so that teachers can focus on what they need to focus on, but bring in other experts as well. So that is my statement. Thank you very much on behalf of Gwlad, the Welsh Independence Party.
Thank you very much, Carl James. Thank you. And thank you for keeping to the 3 minutes perfectly. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over down to the next candidate, Sally Stevenson. Sally.
Thank you, Laura. Evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Sally Stevenson. I'm the Welsh Liberal Democrats Senedd candidate for the Vale of Glamorgan, and I'm also on the South Wales Central regional list. My day job is that I own a small business. I run the Pencil Case, which is a shop on Cowbridge High Street, supplying, would you believe, school uniform to all the 12 schools in the Cowbridge area. But more importantly, I'm the mum of 2 children. I've got a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old who are in years 10 and 12 at Cowbridge Comprehensive School. And previously they went to Llanfair Primary School when they were younger. So as a family, we've experienced firsthand the impact of the COVID pandemic on the education system. My daughter's in the cohort who had their GCSEs cancelled last summer, and she's now going through the stress of daily assessments instead of sitting traditional exams for AS levels. And my son, who's in year 10, was off school from Christmas until Easter. And after being back at school for just 2 days, he and 80 other year 10s had to self-isolate again, as there'd been a positive COVID case in his class. So his poor teachers had to teach classes where half the children were physically in school and the other half were learning from home. And he finally went back to school last Friday, and let's hope he lasts longer than 2 days this time. So as well as being a parent, I've also seen what it's like on the inside, so to speak, as I was a very active parent governor for 10 years. I was Vice Chair of Governors and Chair of the Finance Committee at Llanfair Primary School here in Cowbridge. And I was involved in the recruitment of both the Deputy Head Teacher and the new Head Teacher, and supported all the staff through a very challenging ESTIN inspection a few years ago. So education is a subject I'm incredibly passionate about, and of course I was delighted to sign the NAHT pledge. So the Welsh Liberal Democrats believe there are 3 things that form the foundations for a successful education system: properly supported staff, effective funding, and strong leadership and management. And we'll continue the work of the Education Minister, Kirsty Williams, to give our children the best start in life and to support adults to engage in learning and skills development through a right to lifelong learning. Our key manifesto commitments for education are to continue to provide free school meals throughout the school holidays and significantly invest in programmes to tackle hunger, isolation and exclusion during the school holidays. We want to embed a right to lifelong learning and expand personal learning accounts so that everyone, no matter what their background, can benefit from free, flexible and accessible courses. And thirdly, we want to end digital exclusion at all levels of education, supporting the development of strong digital skills and an access to digital resources. Now, it's essential that our schools have access to the best facilities and resources. And since 2016, we've seen significant investment in our school buildings and infrastructure. Under Kirsty Williams' leadership, 100% of schools now have access to full fibre broadband, compared to just 37% in 2016. So Welsh Liberal Democrats have led the way on investing in early years education, because we know that's where it makes the most difference. Kirsty's continued to invest in the pupil development grant, more than doubling funding for our youngest pupils, and established PDG access to further support families that need it most. However, we do know that more needs to be done. In government, the Welsh Lib Dems have led the new first ever Made in Wales curriculum that puts teachers' expertise at its heart, giving them the freedom to be creative and supporting learners to become confident, capable and compassionate citizens. We want to see an education system which is properly funded, supports all our staff and helps our young people to grow in well-being, confidence and motivation, and allows them to make the most of their education and their whole lives. So our message to teachers and learners across Wales is clear. The Welsh Liberal Democrats understand the issues you face, especially after this incredibly difficult year. We're on your side, and by working together, we will put recovery first. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Sally. And over to you, please, now, Matt. Matt Smith, the Welsh Conservatives. Thanks, Matt.
Well, thank you, Laura, and the NAHT. I trust you can hear me speaking. Is that audible? Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and also I'd like to pay tribute to you as well for organising, I think, the only qua candidate hustings that I've actually been invited to, I think, in this election campaign. Of course, a lot of this campaign is being conducted online, and it's really important that members of the public and the informed educational community can scrutinise their candidates rigorously, and of course you're enabling that. I come at an interest in what the NAHT does from, I suppose, two points of inspiration. One is having gone through the state school education system in Wales myself, having gone to the comprehensive in Cardiff and an FE college in Cardiff, that was really the springboard for me to pursue the rest of my life. I was very fortunate in having excellent state school teachers at St David's Sixth Form College in Cardiff that enabled me to study, to learn. They were inspiring leaders. They prompted an interest in the subjects that I was studying, that then enabled me to go to Oxford and then pursue a career in law, which I've duly brought back. And of course, inspiring through an ethos at the same time, a belief in the importance of giving back, and then actually trying to use what you've learned to help other people who are less fortunate than yourself. I think at times, however, one can't help but notice that kind of experience of state school education is not as widespread. Certainly, I would hope that it could be. And the other perspective that makes me particularly interested in what you've organised this evening is having worked as a disability support worker at a university campus whilst being a law student and assisting people with visual disabilities, and then going on and actually doing an LLM in associative disability discrimination. So I'm particularly, I commend the focus that you've placed on ALN and associated issues. It's absolutely vital that as we move forwards from the pandemic, that we learn the lessons that the teachers have learned on the front line, and put those into effect, so that as we move forwards, state schools across Wales are providing enriching and very valuable experiences for our school pupils. It's not just, it doesn't just contribute, of course, to their well-being and their sense of citizenship, but also, of course, it has a huge bearing on their life outcomes and their life prospects. So I would commend the house that you've organised this evening, and also your work, and I was very pleased to sign your pledge. In terms of what the Welsh Conservatives would seek to do in Cardiff Bay, well, of course, as you've probably seen in the news, we've pledged to recruit up to 5,000 more teachers. We will look to close the funding gap with England, and in terms of the Vale of Glamorgan itself, if I was returned as the MS for this constituency, I would take a no-holds-barred approach to closing the per pupil spending gap with Cardiff and the rest of Wales. I think teachers are amongst the most important people in society. They have a position of leadership, they have a position of conveying values, they have a vital role in providing a continuity of our understanding of who we are as a society, and of course they have a potentially hugely transformative effect on the lives of young pupils. So of course, I personally would seek to do everything I could to support the schools in the Vale of Glamorgan, and obviously I look forward to taking questions during the course of this HUST.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much, and thank you to all candidates. I think it's probably appropriate for me to say at this time that all candidates from the Vale of Glamorgan constituency were invited to this non-selective hustings. We've had apologies from the Labour candidate Jane Hutt and apologies from Anthony Slaughter of the Green Party. So I'm about to begin with some questions, just to let everybody know that these questions were prepared in advance by NAHT and NAHT members. However, these questions have not been shared with the candidates. So unfortunately for them, we will be putting them on the spot with the questions that we've had put forward. I'm going to start off with a question relating to relating to funding, and I'm going to ask this question in reverse order to the way I asked candidates to come forward to give their opening statements. So Matt, I'm going to start with you first of all, please. This question is going to go to everybody, but we'll start with you first. So the question is, following the financial crisis of 2010, the education sector experienced huge cutbacks which had a massive impact on staffing, provision and well-being. The lack of staff meant nearly all schools had to cut small group interventions. The impact of COVID on the mental health and well-being of pupils is not a quick fix. This would also need proper financial investment. Can you promise that education at the chalk face will be protected from cuts in the future in real terms as we move forward in the years to come? And that is to you first of all, please, Matt.
Well, thank you. That's an extremely pertinent question to start from. I mean, ultimately, no administration has 100% control over the course of economic events, and all politics in the end comes down to questions of priorities. Certainly, it would be the foremost priority in my mind to ensure that education, teaching, teachers, and the school pupil experience, state school pupil experience, is properly invested in. Certainly our party's pledge to increase spending on state schools across Wales. I would be very mindful of doing everything I can to champion that argument, both within the Welsh Conservatives and in relation to the Cardiff Bay process in general. I think in the long run, the only way of really guaranteeing that we have the resources as a society to properly invest in education is if we grow the tax base in the economy. And of course, that requires a credible and robust plan to set out a roadmap to the recovery. It may sound like a soundbite, but it's a very simple truism, which is unavoidable. I'm sure all the candidates here would want to sort of set out their own proposals as to how they would do that. But you have to have a growing economy to finance these things. In terms of the financial crash and the ensuing restrictions on fiscal policy, well, of course, the Welsh government has enjoyed significant spending increases over the course of the last decade, and again I do say this does come down to priorities. I think education should be at the top priority really of any incoming Welsh government after May the 6th this year, because ultimately it's what all our tomorrows rest upon. And in terms of the mental health crisis amongst our young people and the severe pressures that have been placed on our teachers in this time, well, of course they rightly deserve their politicians wading in behind them, restoring the valour of teachers, celebrating their role in society, investing in them properly, and ensuring they have all the support they need.
Great, thank you very much. And the same question to you, please, Sally. Would you like me to repeat the question, or are you happy with the question?
No, it's fine. I made a quick note. So, put recovery first is our campaign slogan for this election, but it's not just a slogan, it's the principle upon which all of our plans have been developed for the next Senedd. And education is one of our top 5 priorities for our entire campaign. So what we want to do is institute a spending review after the public health emergency is over, so that we can reshape how the money is spent across all Welsh Government areas, so that we can meet our priorities and make sure that we do invest in our recovery programme. So obviously education is at the heart of that. And politics is about choices. know, if we've got this pot of money, it's a choice as to where you want to spend it. And we absolutely fundamentally want to put education at the heart of everything that drives our recovery going forward. So, you know, we cannot go back to how things were before. We know that COVID has been a real watershed moment for everybody in every area of life. So we want to institute a spending review and make sure that the education sector gets the proper funding that it requires to move forward.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sally. And the same question to you, please, Carl James.
Hi, back again. One thing I'd like to focus on is the issue to do with mental health. What we've seen is an escalation of children and teachers. This is about children and teachers. I'm hearing a lot about teachers, but this is about children. And mental health should be key to the recovery. But we will have other COVIDs, so we've got to be. We need to have mechanisms in place, because this is going to happen again. There's no point dealing with a short-term problem. This is a long-term problem. We need to bring many supply teachers into mainstream teaching. There's so much being said, oh, we'll bring in more teachers. But good teachers take time to train. But we've got a lot of supply teachers, really good supply teachers out there that should be encouraged to come into mainstream teaching, and it should be made easier for them to do so. We need to bring experience of those retired back into the system. I do know that some schools in the Rhondda, for example, did use retired teachers bringing back into the system to relieve some of the pressure. One of the things that I do see is, and reports that I've had, is one thing that's never addressed is the bullying that teachers receive from their pupils, students, and also racism towards teachers. And it goes both ways. Teachers need to be have more support in schools to be able to address bullying of teachers by students, and obviously racism as well. I believe that more control should be given back to school PTAs, for example, and actually back to the schools. But this is about the children. If it wasn't for the children, the teachers would not be there. And we need to see a better package that brings in both children and teachers, and there's too much division at this present moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And the same question to you, please. Bear with me a second. Richard, apologies, Richard. Everybody moved on my screen then and I couldn't see you for a second. Sorry. Same question to you, please.
I'll check if you can hear me now.
I can.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Well, I recognise that education in Wales continues to suffer a funding crisis under the Labour Welsh Government. There was research carried out in 2019, and that showed that school funding was cut 9%, or £500 in real terms, between 2010 and 2021, and that's not acceptable. Similar schools experience different levels of funding, and so we need to bring an end to the post-financial school funding. We would plan to deliver a 3-year budget for education so that schools and further education settings can better plan and utilise the resources. They know they've got that funding in place for 3 years. We'll make sure that funding reaches the front line in an effective and timely manner, moving away from specific grants and last-minute allocations. The extra funding we've allocated will allow schools more capacity for curriculum development and special projects. Our manifesto has been independently costed, none of the parties can say that, including our aim to invest £690 million in education over 5 years. We intend to build on the freedoms devolved pay and conditions can achieve in Wales. We'll give the profession the respect that it deserves. We'd raise the starting salary for teachers in Wales by about 10% to £30,000 from 2022. The 690 million I mentioned, we will invest in education during our first term in government. That will create 4,000 additional teaching staff positions, as well as better pay and improved work conditions. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, everybody, for your answers so far. I'm going to take us to a question that has been posed by one of our colleagues in the chat function. NAHT Cymru talks a lot about curriculum reform and certainly our appetite as a union amongst our membership for curriculum reform. But there's a lot of conversation that goes on, particularly with Welsh Government, around is now the time for curriculum reform, given the pressures, the additional pressures that COVID has put on the profession. I'm going to take you to the specific question that's been posed in the chat function, which is, a lot of hard work has taken place and progress has been made towards the new curriculum for Wales and other current reforms. If there is a change in leadership at the Senedd, can you confirm this work will continue as planned? So I'm going to ask you first, Sally, please, can you respond to that question?
Yeah, of course I can. Thank you, Jen, for the question. There has been a phenomenal amount of work done with the new curriculum over recent years, and it would be absolutely crazy not to keep that work moving forward. So yes, absolutely, we would support the continuation of that work. That notwithstanding, obviously I completely recognise that teachers have been under phenomenal pressure over the last 12 months. As I said in my opening remarks, you know, my kids are at Cambridge Comp and I've seen firsthand how difficult it is for everybody trying to manage COVID and keep the wheels turning, so to speak. So yes, absolutely, let's keep moving things forward, but recognising that we're in a really difficult position right now and we need to make sure that we are putting recovery first and helping everybody get through this difficult time.
Thank you, Sally. So, and the same question to you, please, Carl James. So the question is, just to repeat the question, if your party were to become the leadership at the Senedd, would you continue with current curriculum reform? Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, you're back.
The one thing I'm spotting now is that the danger of pressure. Even though I'd like to say the time now is for change, we've obviously got lots of really serious issues, you know, the mental health, changes to the curriculum. So if we're going to do a restart, something has to give. And what has to give is those constant reports, Iestyn and the model of consortia. We've got to give teachers a break. So if we're going to put pressure on teachers for these changes and for this reform, then we need to take something away. We need to take some pressure away. And we also need more assistance in the classroom for teachers to absorb this. Nobody likes change. Change has to happen. And one of the big things the reason why I'm doing this is heritage and putting the new emphasis of our own history onto the syllabus. But there's so many more things than that. But what we've got to do, the danger is with change, is putting more pressure on teachers. We need to take that pressure away. As I said, let's get those, let's get Iestyn and consortia's models out of the process at this moment, and let teachers do what they need to do. Teach. And then we can see the direction evolving. And that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your response. And the same question to you, please, Richard.
Well, simply, yes, we do support the new curriculum, although I do recognise that the pandemic's had a major impact on schools' ability to prepare and develop that curriculum. We will ensure that teachers have the time and resources they need to prepare and access professional development to implement the curriculum effectively. We conduct a review of initial teacher education and continuing professional development to identify the way in which they need to adapt to the needs of the new curriculum. I support NAHT's call for no statutory curriculum for the academic year 21-22. Most schools concentrate on post-COVID recovery, which is what they have to do, and then prepare for the implementation of the new curriculum for Wales after that.
That's great. Thank you very much, Richard. And the same question to you, please, Matt.
Thank you. Well, yes. I mean, obviously, as much stability in the system at this turbulent time would be highly desirable. In light of the disruption caused by COVID and the additional pressures that has placed on teachers, we as a party would favour delaying implementation of the new curriculum until 2023 to give schools and teachers the opportunity to essentially get a handle on what these new changes mean, and in order that they can work out how best to reintegrate pupils into on-site learning whilst retaining some of the additional benefits of remote learning as well. We would also favour more routes into the profession, and we would look to boost the numbers of teachers in our schools who are coming in at this change moment by opening up sort of apprenticeships and opening up educational routes And of course, we would also look to invest properly in full teacher support and training, and also ensuring that there is an adequate professional development and counselling accompaniment to the teacher training experience, so that we are not just hiring more teachers, but retaining them within the system as well, so that their accumulated experience can benefit not just their colleagues and their own professional development, but of course pupils as well.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you candidates for your answers. I just would like to remind everyone that if anybody in the audience does have a question that they would like to ask, either please share it in the chat function, or feel free to raise your hand and we'll come to you to ask the question directly. I'm going to move on now to another question, and this is around, some of you have already touched on this within your opening statements and with some of your answers to some of the previous questions. But this question is specifically around Estyn. So school leaders were promised an inspection-free year by Estyn to enable schools to prepare for the new curriculum. NAHT's position is that we believe that promise should be kept, and that the academic year 2021 to 22 should be inspection-free, for various reasons, as we've outlined in our manifesto, but also for the reason that is Estyn itself prepared and ready for new inspection arrangements? And I'd like to ask that question, first of all, to Matt, please.
Well, following on from the answer I gave to my previous question, of course, teachers have had a tremendous amount to deal with in the last year. Really, they have, the role of teachers has always been paramount in society, but it's taken on a wholly new vocation, if you like. Now, teachers are not just conveyors of knowledge and education, but they are they have a vital role in shaping a much wider range of experiences that young people go through. And of course, with the turbulence of the last year, we are very mindful of not subjecting teachers to even more upheaval, and which is why we're committed to delaying implementation of the new curriculum until 2023 in order to allow teachers to catch up and put plans in place. I think I would certainly agree in principle that teachers shouldn't have additional pressures and stresses placed on them by Estyn inspections. However, there does need to be a robust system in place to make sure that as we move our education system through the opening up and the resumption of some normality, that we're still all heading in the right direction. There are still clear guidelines. There is still clear advice on school governance. And so I wouldn't advocate suspending the role of Estyn at all. But I would certainly say that there needs to be allowance and flexibility in the way in which inspectors conduct themselves to fully recognise the additional stresses and strains that teachers at the front line have experienced in the shadow of COVID.
That's great, thank you, Matt. And the same question to you, please, Richard.
Well, as I said previously, as a small chair of governors in the Vale of Glamorgan, I've seen the stress that these inspections can take into normal times. So I would support having no inspection in the next year. I would replace Estyn. I want a truly independent inspection review body to ensure proportionate, reliable and fair inspection process that schools and parents can have confidence in it. We support increased government trust in teachers, so there would be fewer inspections under the Plaid Cymru government. We want to bear down on unnecessary administration and bureaucracies, produce a more effective use of resources. The unnecessary bureaucracy is currently distracting what teachers are there to do, which is teaching, and that's the Plaid Cymru position.
Thank you, Richard. And the same question to you, please, Carl James.
Well, I've actually mentioned this already, but one of the things to do with the Estyn reports, I can remember when I was in school, and it would always be that thing from the teachers. We've all got to be perfect, and schools are not going to get this right now for a long time. There's going to be this big period of change with the curriculum, and some schools are going to interpret certain things in certain ways, and any inspectors going into schools now are going to see that some schools are going to fail because some schools are trying to adapt teachers just don't fall off shelves, and there's a lot that makes an educator, and by the looks of it, most of us here are. But the fear of an inspection, this is the other point as well, and I know this has already been mentioned, but the fear of an inspection does cause an exacerbation of problems in regards to mental health, and not just in regards to teachers, but are the students going to be able to support the teachers appropriately when there is an inspection? So all these factors have to come in. Yeah, I don't agree you should completely get rid of inspections, but at least for a year, for people to, and when I mean by people, I'm talking about teachers and the students. For a year, the dust needs to settle, and when the dust needs to settle, we can tweak things and get things right. But unless the dust settles, an inspection now or in 6 months' time would be completely the wrong thing to do. Let's have a break. Let's let teachers and the students do what they need to do, get the system up and running, and that's what needs to happen.
That's great. Thank you very much for your answer. And the same question to you, please, Sally.
Okay. So similarly, I would support not having any inspections for the next year or so while everyone gets back on their feet. I think we really need our teachers now to help our children just recover from this last really difficult year, and we need our teachers to be fully focused on the children and getting them back up to speed again. I've seen firsthand how hard it is to go through an inspection and how much work goes into that, and to put that amount of pressure onto our staff right now would just be totally unfair. What I'd like to see, though, rather than an inspection system over the next 12 to 18 months, is a support system where we can take the best practices that outstanding schools have put in place during COVID and share that learning and those examples with other schools who've maybe found it a bit more difficult and more challenging through the COVID crisis. So I know of some schools who've done a fantastic job at switching to online learning and putting provision in place for children working from home, and other schools have struggled a bit more. So I'd like to see, rather than schools being left almost to their own devices, is there a way that we can share that best practice and share that outstanding provision so that more schools can benefit from that?
Thank you very much. And I can see from the chat function that Chris Britton would like to ask a question. So Chris, hand it over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I've got a question. It's in 3 parts, really, but it's about inequality. And it's about inequality in the sector that I work in, the special needs sector. And it's very much a forgotten sector by politicians, and I won't pull any punches. You know, Carl James talked about teachers coming into mainstream, you know, and that's what we hear all the time, mainstream, not special. So I've got 3 questions on that. One is that given we have primary legislative power over health and education in Wales, why is the provision of health into special schools beyond embarrassing? You should hang your heads in shame for the things that go on in special schools, and I could give you item after item, but if I told you I had to wait 16 weeks for a bed for a child so they could lie down in school in comfort, that's the kind of area we're in. So that's the first thing. The second inequality is, whilst I welcome your pledge for more staff, there's a huge number of learning support assistants in our schools, many of them in special schools. And I think it's terrible that they are not paid for their holidays. Their pay is prorated. You might not even know that. So the pay of all these people who do such key work is prorated. They're among the lowest paid anyway, and we take 25% away from them. And the third inequality for me is that we had a graduate training route into education a few years ago, and I fought to get that so that people in special schools could train as teachers through that graduate route. That's been changed by government now, has gone to the Open University. And the view is now that we are clearly not proper teachers and don't teach a proper curriculum in special schools because my staff need that route. So there are 3 inequalities there. There's the provision of health, there's the pay of support staff, and the ability to train in a special school. And I'm not asking you to respond to each one individually, but I'd like to see some kind of pledge to say, actually, you might look at this forgotten sector and look at some of the work we do and maybe support it more obviously and put a bit more into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And can we ask Carl James to speak first, please? Carl?
Well, I'm actually a teacher with OCD, and I very much have taught children with special needs. And yes, I did mention extramural teachers, and I do apologise. I'm ashamed I didn't mention special needs schools and teachers and so on. So I do apologise for that, and I'm sincerely sorry I didn't mention that. But when we do look at the sector, there is not the parity. You've got mainstream teachers, and you've got extramural teachers like myself. We're the lowest of the low. And then you're saying that you don't feel like your teachers either, which is not the environment. And yes, we have been talking too much about teachers. We've been talking less about those that go to schools, the students, and so on. But we haven't been talking about the other sectors, like the extramural teachers like myself, like those that actually teach special needs. So we do need to address that. And I'm not trying to fob this off. I do know what you feel, because I felt this throughout the pandemic, that we've been ignored, and we've tried to get people being educated. Yes, there needs to be more money for the education overall. We're just talking about one tier of education overall, and that's what needs to be looked at. Yeah, and yeah, what I was trying to say, that we need to get those that are supply teachers back into the system. They've already got the training. There are people out there who have got the training. And we need to get them back into the system. And if we can get them back into the system, all the sectors involved in education can be accommodated. But at this minute, they're not accommodated. And you are very right to raise that question. And I'm ashamed I didn't mention special needs teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl James. Same question to you, please, Richard.
Thank you, Carl. I do recognise that for additional learning needs reform to succeed, there's got to be significant investment in training and support for the schools. We're putting in an extra 690 million, and that would go towards that as well. That's included in that. I would commit to additional learning needs provision with a fundamental principle of equality. And we would employ additional learning needs coordinators. We would certainly, I hear what you said about the pay, and I agree with you on that. And we think it is part of the education system that has been neglected, and we would put an end to that. We would reverse that.
Thank you, Richard. And the same question to you, please, Sam.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We do need to make sure that our children with ALN do get the support that they need in whatever setting that is, be it in a mainstream school or a special school like Ysgolor down the road from me. And I think now, with the coming of the new Senedd, now's the time to review what that support needs to look like. So, as I said earlier, we would like to instigate a spending review after the COVID pandemic and just work out how much money is available and where do we want to put that resource. And absolutely, you're quite right, ALN and special needs education does need to be much more at the forefront of that spending review.
Thank you, Sally. And the same question to you, please, Matt.
Christopher Britton has raised a very, very important point, and it's very difficult to disagree with any of the points that he made. Of course, ALN institutions should have proper investment in facilities so that their pupils are able to learn in comfort and are able to and benefit from adequate health service support, and of course so do their members of staff as well. I think it's also it doesn't make any sense to me at all as to why teachers in ALN institutions would be prorated rather than paid in the same way as everybody else. That does indeed seem to me to be an unfairness that should certainly be addressed. And in terms of the status of ALN teachers, well, clearly that is a very specialist vocation. It's a very, a lot of people who go into that side of the profession are people who have experienced from their own personal life of people with ALN requirements. And I think we should properly recognise and give adequate sort of valour and standing to teachers that are specialising in teaching and caring for pupils in that category. So I think that Christopher should be commended for his campaigning, and I would wholeheartedly support what he said.
That's great. Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our allotted time, I'm afraid. I'd like to very quickly hand over to our President, Karina Hansen, just for any closing remarks. Karina?
Thank you. Thank you for coming along to speak to us, to answer our questions, and to give us a good idea of how you're going to support education moving forward. Great to see that some of you have already signed up to our pledge. That's really great. I wish whoever is elected the best of luck, and I hope to see you upholding your promise to us. That would be fantastic moving forward. So thank you to all of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Karina. And just leaves me to bring the meeting to a close again, to add my thanks to all the candidates who have taken the time to join us this evening. We wish every candidate standing in the Vale of Glamorgan the best of luck, and look forward to working with whoever is successful. Thank you very much. Good night.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr i chi. Cheers.